Chester County, and welcome back to another episode of Locker Room Buzz. I'm your host, CJ Tully, and we have lots to talk about today within the sports world. We have the World Series coming up, so we'll be previewing that. The Eagles get back in the win column, so everything going on with the Birds and Brandon Graham coming back. College football is still red hot, and the Flyers, they're in a wild card spot right now. I know it's still early, but we'll get into that. Starting off here, though, with the World Series. This is the first show. We won't be going straight into leading off with the Phillies, but the Dodgers and the Blue Jays will be meeting in the World Series, USA versus Canada. I'll be giving you guys my pick at the end of this segment here, but the Dodgers, they steamrolled over the Brewers, and they also did that throughout the entire playoffs here, as they beat the Reds in 2 games, 2-0. They beat the Phillies, obviously, in 4 games. That was 3-1. Phillies still should have won that series. They then swept the Brewers 4-0. And in that Brewer series, they won 2-1, 5-1, 3-1, and then 5-1 again. So the common denominator there being how great this pitching has been. Shohei Ohtani, he's been doing it on the mound and at the plate, but I will say, with at the plate, that was a lot in the Red Series. You haven't been seeing much of him since then. He obviously did win the MVP there within the series, but I don't think he necessarily deserved it. So far in the postseason, he has hit 5 home runs, 9 RBIs. He's walked 7 times, has 17 strikeouts, though. He's hitting .220 for average. So Shohei Ohtani hasn't been the electric guy that we've been expecting. Again, he had that great game to close out the series there in Game 4, but when you look at the rest of the series, he hasn't been doing all that much at the plate. Now on the mound, he's been 2-0 with a 2.25 ERA in 12 innings pitched with 19 strikeouts. So you could say he's doing well on the mound, but I do think that he's still somewhat of a liability right now at the plate. And I think you could say that about a lot of this Dodgers lineup. The pitching has been the biggest part here. And when you look back at the Phillies series and how nitpicky we were with the Phillies and their at-bats, I think it's starting to look like maybe it wasn't the Phillies having the worst at-bats, but the Dodgers pitching has just been stellar throughout the entire postseason here, and we started to see that again within this Brewer series, holding them to 1 run in every game. So who else has been doing it on the mound for the Dodgers? Well, Blake Snell is 3-0. He's having a bit of a resurgence with a .86 ERA and 21 innings pitched with 28 strikeouts. Tyler Glasnow, he's been starting to make a bit of an appearance for himself. Still no wins or losses on the postseason, but he does have a .68 ERA. He pitched phenomenal against the Phillies as well. He has pitched in 13.1 innings so far this postseason. Yoshinobu Yamamoto, he is 2-1 with a 1.83 ERA with 19.2 innings pitched and 18 strikeouts. So again, this Dodgers team has been getting it done on the mound. Obviously, they can put up enough runs to get it done. The 7th inning is seeming to be where they thrive in that. So when it comes to this series, what are the Blue Jays going to do to be able to counteract that? Well, they're coming off one of the most fun to watch series ever in the postseason that I've watched against that series with the Mariners. It was kind of a toss-up as to who was going to win that one. Game 7 just made everything come to a great conclusion there, as the series was a battle, and they ended up battling it out there in Game 7. The Blue Jays beat the Yankees in their first series in 4 games, 3-1. They then beat the Mariners, as I just mentioned, in 7 games, 4-3. Now, how did the series with the Mariners kind of play out here? They lost Game 1, 3-1. They lost Game 2, 10-3. Both of those games at home, so it seemed like things were really going to go the wrong way there for the Blue Jays. They then bounced back in Seattle and went 13-4 and 8-2. They then lose Game 5, 6-2, and then closing out with 2 wins, 6-2 and 4-3. So you saw a lot in this series and throughout the Blue Jays stint, even against the Yankees there, where the games they were winning, they were putting up tremendous amount of runs. I believe the team is averaging a 300 average at the plate, and their pitching's been doing pretty well as well. You obviously have those outliers where the Mariners were putting up a good amount of points there and a few of those losses. Same with the Yankees in their big win. They ended up bouncing back on that bullpen, but Blue Jays are a very at-the-plate team. So I think they match up well with the Dodgers when the Dodgers are so heavy in pitching. But I think the difference is going to be the Dodgers can get it started at the plate. You do have an Ohtani. You do have a Freeman. And Freeman, I mean, he is home run, 4 doubles. He's hitting .231. So he hasn't even completely kicked it off yet. Same with Mookie Betts, 4 doubles, 6 RBIs, a .293 average, and an .809 OPS. And these guys haven't really even been the difference makers yet. So that's what scares me there with the Dodgers when it comes to this World Series. Seems like they still have so much more to give at the plate. But again, you look at this lineup here for the Blue Jays. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is absolutely stellar so far this postseason. 6 home runs, 3 doubles, 12 RBIs, a .442 average, and a 1.4 OPS. I mean, you couldn't be asking for more from Vlad. He's made that contract completely worth it already, giving them a World Series push. Now, George Springer, 4 home runs, 5 doubles, 9 RBIs, a .239 average, and a .930 OPS. He got nailed in the kneecap a few nights ago, and it looked like he was going to be out. It looked like the kneecap was shattered, couldn't even walk on it. Comes back in that Game 7 and hits the home run to make the difference, that 3-run home run against the Mariners. He is electric. He's obviously been doing it for a while now. And then some of the guys on the back end of this lineup that, you maybe weren't expecting the most from when it comes to a postseason push. Alejandro Kirk, 3 home runs, 7 RBIs, a 222 average, and a 753 OPS. Then you look at Dalton Varsho. Who would have thought he'd be the one to show up here in the postseason? He is currently hitting 4 doubles, 2 home runs, 8 RBIs, a 273 average, and an 804 OPS. And then the guy who's been doing it all, the guy who stood out to me the most, who, I'll be honest, I wasn't really too sure of who he was coming into the postseason. That's Ernie Clement. 3 doubles, 1 home run, 7 RBIs with a 429 average and a 1.063 OPS. Ernie Clement has been the difference maker. Every team in the postseason needs that spark plug, that kind of a wild card player that nobody's sure of. And Ernie Clement has been that here for the Blue Jays team. And I think he is going to be, again, another difference maker within this World Series. Blue Jays obviously having the 1 seed there within the AL, so they'll be getting the home field, as the Dodgers were not the 1 seed there. But I do think the series is going to play out to be very interesting. I do think it is kind of impressive that you do have one of the best starting rotations coming against one of the best lineups right now in the postseason. I think that is where the difference will be made. Looking at the rotation here that you have going for the Blue Jays, you have Shane Bieber, who's 1-0 with a 4.38 ERA, 15 strikeouts. Kevin Gausman, 2-1 with a 2 ERA with 18 innings pitched. Trey Yusevich, 2-1 with a 4.20 ERA. And then Max Scherzer, playing in his 4th World Series with a different team. He is 1-0 with a 3.831 OPS and ERA. So, again, not the worst rotation you have here going for the Blue Jays, but I just think the way it stacks up with that Dodgers rotation is not the best. I do think the Blue Jays have the better bullpen. You're not seeing great bullpen play out of the Dodgers. It kind of gets weary. So if you are the Blue Jays and you can hop on them early, you can get a good 3 to 4 run lead within the first 5 innings of the game. I think that's where you can thrive. I think the Dodgers do really thrive off this starting pitching. So if you can get a Glasnow, an Ohtani out of the game early, a Blake Snell, that's where you make the money. That's where the Phillies needed to do something early. They need to get the damage done early, and in the one game they did, you saw what happened. They finally got a win. So you go to the back end of the Dodgers bullpen. It's very weak. The guys in there are not fit necessarily for the postseason. They can obviously bring one out as a closer for 1 inning, but if they have to go innings on innings with relief pitchers here, that's where you can get to them. Clayton Kershaw, I'm not sure if he's going to make the roster, if he has made the roster, but we saw what the Phillies were able to do to him, making him a piñata the way they're hitting him around all night. So there's a lot of opportunity here for the Blue Jays. This series was hard for me to pick because obviously I'm not a fan of the Dodgers whatsoever. But then you look at it and it's Canada, and they beat us in hockey. They can have hockey, but baseball is our sport. It's America's pastime. So you can look at it in multiple ways. I'm still going to take the Blue Jays in this one. I'm going to go with the Canadian team here just because of the animosity I have towards the Dodgers, and I can't get behind the Ohtani thing. I still think he might be guilty. You look at this rotation, there's just not that many likable people if you're not a fan of the team on the Dodgers. You can really get behind this Toronto Blue Jays lineup. I mean, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and the story that he has and how he wants to win this for his dad who played baseball as well. You look at guys like Ernie Clement and Dalton Varsho, guys who are just coming up and making a name for themselves. George Springer, maybe not a lot of people like him because he cheated with the Astros, but there's more likable faces on this Blue Jays team. I like the way they play baseball. I like the atmosphere that they bring to a team, and I think that this team can get it done. So give me the Blue Jays. I say they win it in 6 because I do think the home field advantage will play big here. Looking at the head-to-head that they had this season, they had a 3-game series in L.A. The Blue Jays lost Game 1, 1-5. The Blue Jays then lost Game 2, 1-9, and then they won Game 3, 5-4 over the Dodgers. So, again, even in that, you see the starting pitching holding the Blue Jays to 1 run in the 2 losses. So it all comes down to how much offense the Blue Jays can put up, and I do think that's where the Blue Jays would match up better with the Dodgers because you did see a bit of streakiness with the Mariners offense. The Blue Jays offense has been able to get it done throughout the entire postseason. So give me the Blue Jays in 6. I think it'll be an exciting series, and I do think home field plays a big part within this one. When we come back, we got lots in college football and within NFL, so stay tuned here on 95.3 WCHA. Welcome back to Locker Room Buzz. I'm your host, CJ Tully, and we have lots to get to here within college football. As I had mentioned last week, there were some games that I felt like were must-wins for some of these SEC squads. You also saw a lot of things shake up within the Big 12, so as always, let's get into some college football. mentioned before, you had 3 big games within the SEC where we needed to see some teams pick up wins. They did not. That was LSU, Ole Miss, and Tennessee. Those were 3 teams that I felt like were highly ranked, but hadn't yet gotten that big win to prove to us why they deserved that ranking. And then so we saw our fear with LSU. They went over to Vanderbilt. They lost that one 31-24. Vanderbilt really making a statement for themselves as Diego Pavea. He has continued to dominate here within the SEC. And this one, he won 160 yards, 1 touchdown. He also rushed for 2 touchdowns. So a good outing there for Vanderbilt as they moved to 6-1 on the season and are currently ranked number 10. But going back to LSU and this whole team that I talked about as to they needed to prove something. They started off the season with that win over Clemson, but you look back to that, and Clemson was not the team that we had all expected them to be going into the season, so I don't think we can give them credit for that win as much as we might have coming into the season. LSU now sits 5-2 and ranked number 20 in the country, falling down 10 spots from just a week ago. Now, the difference in this game with LSU was that defense was able to hold them into a lot of games. That defense has kind of stepped up with Weeks and all the guys. They were able to hold LSU to games that the offense wasn't performing in, and you saw the defense let up 31 points in this one, and then that offense just still not able to get it done. You look at Garrett Nussmeier, their quarterback. He is somebody that we looked at as a possible Heisman coming into the season. Him and Cade Klubnik up there, tied for the top spot there. He's just not been able to do it this season. He goes 19 for 28 in this one with 225 yards and 2 touchdowns. So definitely not his worst performance of the season, but not enough to get you over that hump. Same with Caden Durham. He goes for 59 yards on the ground. But again, nothing that's exciting, nothing that's getting you over the hump when that defense hasn't stepped up in this game here. Wide receiver 1 was Xavier Thomas. He goes for 75 yards and a touchdown. And then Tradez Green, the tight end, he goes for 74 yards with a touchdown as well for LSU. But LSU now falling to number 20. They will have a big matchup with Texas A&M this week, which I'll get to in just a bit. But if they lose that one, I think LSU is completely done. And I think Brian Kelly has to worry about his job going forward, bringing him over from Notre Dame. Just hasn't been able to get over that hump there with LSU. Back to this Vanderbilt team, though, as they've been exciting and fun to watch, and they have another big matchup coming up this week. I do believe College Game Day will be down there this week. So, again, that environment, the animosity, everything will be building up down there. I mentioned what Pavea has been able to do. Macklin Young, the running back, he goes for 82 yards this week, and the wide receiver 1 was Cole Spence for 56 yards and a touchdown. So, again, nothing to jumping off the plate for you, but they're able to get it done. 6-1 on the season. Their remaining schedule is at Missouri, or versus Missouri this week at home. They'll then be at number 22 Texas, home versus Auburn, home versus Kentucky, and then finish the season off against Tennessee, who's currently ranked number 17. So Vanderbilt can maybe afford one more loss if that is to a Missouri, but I'm not sure they really can because you look at the SEC and how stacked it is. I do think 4 teams will make it from the SEC into the playoffs, and I think if Vandy runs the table, they could find themselves as one of those teams. Beating Missouri next week would be huge. Now going to the Ole Miss and Georgia game, and I think Ole Miss also needed a win. They were sitting at 6-0. They were ranked highly, number 5 coming into this week. They lose to Georgia 43-35. You saw the defense just let up at one point in this game. They lose this one, as I said, 43-35. Georgia continuing to be dogs. I mean, they continue to find ways to win. They've trailed by double digits in multiple games now, always pulling out the win, though, except for that game against Alabama. They are also now 6-1 on the season. Trinidad Chambliss looked great for Ole Miss, 19 for 36, 263 yards with a touchdown through the air and 2 on the ground. So, again, this offense is not the issue when it comes to Ole Miss. This defense has just not been able to step up. It's actually kind of the opposite issue that I just mentioned there with LSU. On the ground for Ole Miss, you had Kejuan Lacey. He goes for 31 yards, but gets 2 touchdowns on the ground. Number 1 wide receiver was Dejon Stribling. He goes 3 receptions for 96 yards and 2 touchdowns. But again, Georgia coming out on top, and that was a huge part of Gunnar Stockton's game here. 26 for 31, 289 yards with 4 touchdowns through the air. He also rushed for a touchdown as well, so contributing to a lot of those points there for Georgia. Through the air, you had Zachariah Branch. He goes for 71 yards. And tight end Lawson Lucky, 5 receptions for 43 yards and 3 touchdowns. Another big storyline coming into this game was that Georgia has not involved the tight ends. Well, there you go, Lawson Lucky. You were the lucky one today, and you got involved for Georgia. But, again, both teams now sitting 6-1 on the season. Ole Miss moves down to number 8 on the AP poll, and Georgia moves up to number 5. So I do think these are still 2 teams that can make a playoff push here. I think that Georgia definitely has kind of secured their spot here. I think that it'll be really interesting what happens in that final game against Georgia Tech to end the season. But Ole Miss kind of on the outside looking in right now. They are sitting at number 8, but they have a big matchup coming up with Oklahoma, which I think will determine the fate of the rest of their season. But I do like the way Lane Kiffin has been coaching this team, and I think the offense has definitely stepped up when they need to. And Trinidad Chambliss being the backup quarterback to start the season, coming in here and making the difference for them. Moving on to the final SEC game that I thought really stood out to me and that we needed to watch this weekend. That's number 11 Tennessee headed to number 6 Alabama. Alabama coming out on top in this one, 37-20. And this game was Tennessee's for a while. They kind of threw the game there right before the half. You saw them go down, or they were up early. They kind of started to trickle out and fall down. But they had a chance to get back in this game right before the halftime. And then they throw a pick six right on like the 5-yard line. So horrible play calling there by them to finish out the half. Can't be throwing a pick six in that situation. You just want to get to the half, maybe run the ball a few times. They had some timeouts. Horrible play calling and clock management by them. They fall to 5-2. Joey Aguilar didn't look horrible in this one. 28 for 44, 268 yards, touchdown and an interception. I mentioned coming into this game that Joey Aguilar has not been the issue for Tennessee. I think he's played overall well, but Tennessee now falls to number 17 on the AP poll. Deshaun Bishop on the ground. He goes 14 carries, 123 yards, and 2 touchdowns for Tennessee. So again, it hasn't really been this offense being the issue. It's just not being able to put up enough, and it's costly, timely mistakes that are costing them in these games. Alabama, on the other hand, moves to 6-1 after a horrible start to the season with that big loss to Florida State. Everybody counting Alabama out. And now they're looking like Alabama of old, the Nick Saban days. Ty Simpson, 19 for 29 in this one, 253 yards with 2 touchdowns on the ground. A duo of attack here. Daniel Hill, 7 carries for 34 yards and a touchdown. And then Jam Miller, the number 1 back, 12 carries, 15 yards for a touchdown as well. Now, Ryan Williams had himself a decent day, 5 receptions, 87 yards. But I think Alabama is here to stay. I think they should be one of the top 3 ranked teams right now in the country. Just you look at the resume they had, and this was kind of one of the issues where I thought they could fall off because, I mean, they were beating teams. They beat Vanderbilt. They beat Missouri. They beat all these teams back to back to back. Georgia. I thought they were due for a letdown game with Tennessee, and Tennessee could have taken advantage of that. And I do think if Tennessee scored going into the half, they could have really taken advantage of that. But then you gave all momentum back to Alabama, and you could just not hang within this game. But Alabama now 6-1 with a lot of big wins under their belt. I think they are a true contender for a national championship. And I think we might have all over-exaggerated that loss to Florida State maybe to start the season. Now, coming out of the SEC into another division here, we had the USC Notre Dame game. And this was a game where I thought this had huge playoff implications. I think if USC won, they could have slotted themselves at the 4th Big Ten team to make the playoffs. And I think if Notre Dame won, it obviously would have just given them a playoff spot because they would have beat at least one decent team as after losing to Texas A&M and Miami to start the season. Notre Dame does pick up the win, 34-24. And this was a game where C.J. Carr didn't even play well at quarterback, but the run game was absolutely lethal, and costly turnovers by Jaden Maeva of USC made the difference here. USC falls to 5-2 on the season. Again, this offense is absolutely lethal, and they had been for the entirety of the season. But Maeva goes 22 for 42, 328 yards with 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. On the ground, King Miller, 18 carries for 70 yards. Wayman Jordan out for a while now for USC, actually might be out for the season, so Miller had to fill in there, and you lost a huge piece of that offense with Wayman Jordan coming out. Jacoby Lane, he goes 6 receptions for 111 yards and a touchdown for USC, so an overall decent offensive outing just was not enough for what Notre Dame was able to do. C.J. Carr, 16 for 26, 136 yards, 1 touchdown and an interception, but again, on the ground, Jeremiah Love, one of my picks for Heisman to start the season, he goes 24 carries, 228 yards, 1 touchdown. He also had 37 yards receiving. Jadarian Price, another guy on the ground, 13 carries, 87 yards, and a touchdown. They also had a kick return touchdown, which muted any kind of momentum that USC was getting going. USC scored a touchdown. They were getting back in this game, immediately let up a kickoff return, and that took all of the life out of USC for the remainder of this game. Notre Dame now ranked number 12 after, again, that horrible start to the season, starting 0-2. They have not lost since, and I do think they have secured themselves a spot in the playoffs as their schedule is the easiest possibly of all time going into the end of the season here. Some other things, though, around the league, as those were the biggest breakdowns. We also had a firing at Florida as Billy Napier gets fired after 3.5 years of service with Florida. He was 21-23 in that time, and the buyout was $21 million. So you're seeing this a lot around the league where coaches are being fired. Some coaches are said to be staying for the remainder of the season, and then they'll be on their way out. I think that's an example of Brian Kelly. I think he could be on his way out. But so many job openings opening up here. There's a lot of names and speculation as to who could fit what role. My pick for the Penn State gig was going to be Manny Diaz from Duke, so I'm still going to stick with that one. When it comes to this Florida opening, I think that's where you can see James Franklin fit in. I know he had talked on game day that he still wants to win a national championship, and I think it would be a good deal for him to go over there to Florida, work within the SEC, is familiar with the Big Ten, see what he can do with that Florida team and a young squad. That's my pick there for the Florida job. You're also seeing it throughout the league where people like Indiana are re-signing their coach because they know how many job openings there are. So I'm very curious to see how this all plays out when it comes to the end of the season and just how many job openings there will be come that time. But moving on here, we had Louisville and Miami. This was a game I actually podcasted on Let's Talk Sports on Spotify immediately after the game because after watching it, I thought this was going to shake up the AP poll a lot more than it did. I thought Miami would have fallen a lot further than they did after being ranked one of the top 3 teams. But Louisville winning this one 24-21, and Carson Beck just had one of his worst games in college ever. He goes 25 for 35, 271 yards with 4 interceptions, including the one that wins the game for Louisville after a fingertip interception. It was absolutely beautiful. For the Louisville side of things, though, Miller Moss goes 23 for 37, 248 yards with 2 touchdowns. Isaac Brown, 15 carries, 113 yards. He is somebody that stood out to me when I started watching college football last year was Isaac Brown and Mekhi Hughes. Those were 2 of the guys that I thought were very, very impressive. Then you look here at Chris Bell, 9 receptions, 136 yards with 2 touchdowns. So overall, solid day for Louisville as they were able to pull off the upset against Miami. Moving forward here within the Big 12, we had Georgia Tech. They took on Duke in a game that obviously looked a lot better before Duke started losing some games, but Georgia Tech winning 27-18. They go 7-0 on the season, and the biggest standout here for Georgia Tech has to be Haynes King. I think he should be in contention for a Heisman. The way he has been able to carry this team, bring them back from what they were just a few years ago. He went 14 for 21 in this one, 205 yards. He also rushed for 120 yards with a touchdown. So a great outing here for Haynes King. And then you look at the schedule remaining. Can they go undefeated? Can they make a serious push here within the ACC for Georgia Tech? Well, they have a matchup against Syracuse. They'll be at NC State, at Boston College, home versus Pitt, and then at Georgia. I think they can win out here, and then it'll all come down to that game against Georgia as to whether or not they're just an automatic bid at that point. I do think they'll be up for the ACC championship game, but I'm not sure about the automatic bid just yet. I think they would have to win that game against Georgia. Moving on here, we also had Oklahoma with a big game against South Carolina. Oklahoma moving to 6-1 after a big loss in the Red River rivalry to Texas. Again, in that game, I just don't think John Mateer was ready necessarily after coming back from that injury. He goes 18 for 26, 150 yards, 1 touchdown. He also rushed for 14 yards. So John Mateer is somebody who had been doing it on the ground before the injury. We haven't yet seen him get back to that. I believe he had like 6 rushing yards last week and now 14 this week. So if he can get back to going on the ground when he gets fully healthy, I think that'll be huge for this team. But Oklahoma still making some noise, still keeping their playoff hopes alive. You also had Torrey Blaylock. He has 19 carries for 101 yards and a touchdown on the ground. Xavier Robinson, 11 carries, 58 yards, and a touchdown as well. And then Isaiah Signetti III. He's been their biggest wide receiver. He's kind of been their only wide receiver that they can rely on. He goes 7 receptions, 73 yards, and a touchdown as well in that win over South Carolina, keeping their playoff hopes alive. Moving forward here, we had Texas Tech at Arizona State, and this was a trap game, I felt like. I feel like, obviously, you had starting quarterback Baron Morton not playing for Texas Tech, but you looked at it, and Will Hammond had been playing well in the time that he had to fill in, so you thought maybe Texas Tech had a chance. Sam Levitt wasn't necessarily healthy coming into this game. He was coming off an injury as well. Arizona State wins this one, though, 26-22, moving to 5-2 on the season. Texas Tech, that was their first loss of the season. Will Hammond goes 22 for 37, 167 yards, 2 touchdowns. He also rushed for a touchdown as well. And then Coy Eakin, the wide receiver, he goes 66 yards for a touchdown. But Arizona State showed up, and they played like they know they could. Sam Levitt, 28 for 47, 319 yards, and a touchdown. On the ground, Raleek Brown, 19 carries, 69 yards, and a touchdown. And then Jordan Tyson, I said this every week now that I think he's one of the most underrated wide receivers in college football. He goes 10 receptions for 105 yards and a touchdown. So Arizona State, I wouldn't count them out yet necessarily. They'll now be ranked after being unranked just a week prior. But you look at the schedules remaining for Texas Tech and Arizona State, and I still think it's very favorable for Texas Tech within this Big 12. Next week they'll be playing Oklahoma State, then they'll be at Kansas State, home versus BYU, which could be a huge game within the Big 12 there. I think winner could be the champion in this one. They'll then be home versus UCF, and then at West Virginia. So again, the only real challenging game coming at that game versus BYU, and they will be home for that one. Looking at Arizona State, though, as Arizona State will now hold the tiebreaker over Texas Tech, they'll be home versus Houston, at Iowa State, home versus West Virginia, at Colorado, and then home versus Arizona. So very challenging schedule there for them. Houston is still a very hot team right now. Iowa State and Rocco Beck, they're still getting it done. Obviously not to the extent that everybody would have thought, but still a very challenging team there. So we'll see how it all plays out. Still think Texas Tech should be the favorite here in the Big 12. But then you looked at the holy war that happened on Saturday night, and Utah took on the battle at BYU. BYU wins this one 24-21 in a very, very exciting game, and I think it was a huge game within the Big 12. Devin Dapier, 20 for 36, 244 yards with 2 touchdowns. Daniel Bray, 10 carries, 121 yards, and a touchdown for Utah. But it was all BYU when you look at these stats here. Bear Brockmeyer, that's an awesome name, Bear Brockmeyer. 13 for 22, 166 yards, and a touchdown in the air. On the ground, L.J. Martin, 26 carries for 122 yards, and then Parker Kingston through the air with 4 receptions for 50 yards. What is BYU's remaining schedule? How are they going to be able to compete? They do have at Iowa State, at Texas Tech, which I mentioned was going to be a huge game, home versus TCU, at Cincinnati, Cincinnati, I think we're 1 or 2 wins away from considering them as serious contenders here for the Big 12, and then they'll be home versus UCF to finish out the season. So still lots that can happen here within this college football season. I'm going to cut to a quick timeout. If you wanted to call it 610-701-9243, just call during a break. I'll get you on the air here. But when we come back, I'll be finishing up college football and then getting into the NFL slate. So stay tuned here on 95.3 WCHE. I'm your host, CJ Tully. Just finishing up with some college football things here. We have some big games coming up this weekend as well. I've loved the way that the season has played out in college football in general. I feel like every week we have a ranked matchup, which is very exciting, and I think that's how things should be. I think teams should be playing the best competition throughout the season. So what are some games we can keep an eye on this weekend? Let's start here with UCLA at Indiana, ranked number 2. UCLA, obviously not ranked, not high standing or anything, but the way they've been able to play and the teams that they've been able to compete with, they're starting to flip a page here on their kind of tenure here with that coaching staff, and I think UCLA could be an interesting matchup for Indiana. I'm not saying whatsoever that I think it's going to be an upset. I think Indiana is the best team in college football, making that clear. I still think they're better than Ohio State, just given the wins that they have had. Ohio State just hasn't had them yet. But that game will be at 12 o'clock. Keep an eye on that one, possible upset alert there. Now, also at 12 o'clock, we're going to have number 8 Ole Miss at number 13 Oklahoma. This is the game that John Mateer was supposed to come back. This is when he was supposed to be most healthy. So I'm hoping to see him, again, use those legs, use that ground game, and start to get things going yet again. Ole Miss, coming off that loss to Georgia, I think this is a must-win. Thought last week was a must-win, but this one more than ever. Winner of this game has the chance to take the SEC by storm and get that 4th spot. Loser is eliminated, in my opinion. At 3:30, we're going to have number 4 Alabama at South Carolina. The boys have been starting to turn it around a little bit there at South Carolina. You're starting to see a little bit better play there out of Lenora Sellers, and the guys are just starting to get it done. So possible another matchup here with a great team for Alabama. So you just think at some point Alabama's going to have to break. We'll see if they prove me wrong. Maybe they're just that kind of team this year. Another game at 3:30, 15 Missouri at number 10 Vanderbilt. Another game where I think the loser is just eliminated and the winner can start to make a name for themselves. Bo Pabula coming off a loss there to Alabama a few weeks ago. He had a chance to win the game. He could not get it done. Vanderbilt, on the other hand, coming off that big win over LSU. Let's see if they can keep the things rolling here and they can make themselves really known for a playoff push here. Again, another game at 3:30. We're going to have number 23 Illinois at Washington. Now, I don't necessarily think this game is huge. Washington is a great team at home. They did lose to Ohio State, though, at home. But, again, still teams fighting here for that 4th spot within the Big Ten. I do think 4 teams are going to make it. And I think one of these teams can win. They still have great records, both 5 and 2. If one of them can win out, they might be able to get that final spot there within the Big Ten with Penn State being out. USC with their loss to Notre Dame. One of these 2 teams can still make a name for themselves for that final spot. And then at 7:30, we're going to have number 3, Texas A&M, headed to LSU number 20. This is now a must-win for Brian Kelly's job, I feel like. If Texas A&M goes in there and rolls them in Louisiana, I think, well, first off, that's completely knocking out LSU from playoff contention. Texas A&M, that just continues to grow their standing, and I love that team at Texas A&M. If you guys saw my video on LRBuzz_pod on Instagram, they are my national champion right now. I think Texas A&M is built so well on defense. You look at that offense, Marcel Reed, Casey Concepcion, Mario Craver. So many guys on that team can get it done. Yes, they lost their lead back, but they have so much talent on that offense. The defense could put up great numbers. I mean, what was the number? A few weeks ago, they had held teams to 3 for 30 on 3rd downs. That's incredible. If that defense can continue to play at that level, they are a team that's going to compete for a national championship. I believe it. Texas A&M, if they go in and beat LSU, that only boosts that standing. Sitting at the number 3 team in the country right now, I think that would just continue to make a rise for them. At 8 o'clock, we're going to have Houston headed to Arizona State. That was a game I previewed just a little bit ago. Houston 6-1 on the season. Arizona State 5-2. Houston's another team. Let's not give up on them just yet. They can still make a run. Their only loss was to Texas Tech. And again, they're the hierarchy right now of the Big 12. So some interesting games this week. I think they'll play out well. And again, very interesting games. I think that's something that college football has done great this year. I think their first big step in making college football enjoyable again was making more teams in the playoffs. Last year, with having the 12-team playoff, it made every game mean a little bit more just because it wasn't just 4 teams were going to make it, and you kind of knew before the season started who those 4 teams were going to be. Now that you can extend it a little bit, there's chance for upsets. There's chance for every week to have a meaningful game when it comes to playoff contention here, and I think that they're doing a great job with that here. Again, looking at the rankings, some big moves here we had. The first big move was Georgia moving up 4 spots to number 5. Georgia Tech move up 5 spots as well as they go to number 7 overall, and do not sleep on Georgia Tech just yet. Miami moves down 7 spots after their loss. I thought they'd move down a little bit more, just given Louisville was not ranked. Vanderbilt moves up 7 spots. BYU up 4 spots. Notre Dame finds themselves at number 12. Texas Tech, with that loss to Arizona State, moves down 7 spots to number 14. Tennessee moves down 6 spots to number 17. Louisville, unranked last week, now number 19. LSU goes down 10 spots. Cincinnati up 3 spots, which again, keep an eye on Cincinnati. I think we're almost at the point where we could talk about them truly being contenders, but just need a few more weeks, in my opinion, to fully do so. Texas, they go down a spot to number 22. Illinois was unranked. They're now 23. Arizona State unranked, now 24. And Michigan finds themselves back up here at 25. Michigan, another team, I think has a chance to be that 4th team in the Big Ten. But I think they're going to have to beat Ohio State at the end of the year for that to happen, which is how things have played out for the past few years. So don't count that out just yet. But that would do it for college football. Again, check out a lot of those games. That is the biggest sport I cover there on my podcast at Let's Talk Sports. So if you're ever interested in any of that, check that out on Spotify and YouTube. Moving on, though, to the NFLs, we had another big slate and some games that I think really determine where teams are going in the future for the remainder of this season. Starting off on Thursday Night Football, that was the icy hot battle, I think is what my brother said people in his class were calling it. The Steelers and the Bengals. Bengals win this one 33-31. Steelers go to 4-2 on the season, while the Bengals go to 3-4. So I know there was a lot of things going on within the AFC North as Mike Tomlin was not too happy with the situation that the Bengals were trading for a quarterback in division with the Browns and getting Joe Flacco, and now it shows why. Aaron Rodgers did go 23 for 34 in this one for 249 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Jalen Warren on the ground had 127 yards, so good outing there for them. Number 1 receiver was tight end Pat Freiermuth, 5 receptions for 111 yards with 2 touchdowns. But then you move over to this Bengals team, and this offense has a whole new life. This team is rejuvenated around Joe Flacco. He goes 31 for 47, 342 yards with 3 touchdowns. On the ground, Chase Brown, 108 yards. And then the wide receivers finally getting involved with a quarterback who can actually throw the ball more than 10 yards. Jamar Chase, 16 receptions for 161 yards and a touchdown. T. Higgins, 96 yards with a touchdown of his own. So Bengals are still competing here. I think it's going to be a fight now between the Steelers and the Bengals. The Ravens can pretty much count themselves out just the way things have been going. And Lamar is still questionable now. I believe he was supposed to play this week, but I'm seeing that he's still questionable. So we'll see what happens with that there. But the Steelers and the Bengals, who would have thought those were the 2 teams fighting here with Joe Flacco at quarterback and Aaron Rodgers. And I think if Joe Flacco can keep them involved just long enough, Joe Burrow can come back and continue to make things be a difference here for the Bengals. Moving on, though, we had another game in England, which is just making people think that football is not fun if you're watching from over there. Rams win this one 35-7 over the Jaguars. And I don't know what it is. I just feel like those games are never exciting over there when they go overseas for these football games early in the morning. You know, you wake up, it's like we finally have football. It's early. I love that. But the games are never that exciting. I feel like they ship over games that maybe people don't want to watch. And I would try and get those games a little bit better. I know you don't want to take necessarily a big home game away from a team. I'm against that as well. But these games just never seem fun. And it feels like it's always raining as well. So that always plays a factor. But Matthew Stafford turned into Joe Heisman. He goes 21 for 33, 182 yards with 5 touchdowns on the day. Devontae Adams, 35 yards with 3 of those touchdowns. And as a Devontae Adams fan or fantasy owner, I would have liked a little bit more yardage there on those 3 touchdowns, but I'll take it. Trevor Lawrence, on the other hand, 23 for 48, 296 yards with a touchdown. And Travis Hunter, he finally showed up there for the Jaguars, 8 receptions, 101 yards, and a touchdown. Just picked him up in my fantasy league. See if he can continue to do what he's doing there. The Saints and the Bears in a matchup that I thought the Saints had a better shot in than maybe things turned out. They lose this one 26-14. Bears looking like they're rolling right now. Spencer Rattler, 20 for 32, 233 yards, 2 touchdowns, but did have 3 interceptions. I still think the Saints need their guy. I think this team is in a weird spot. I mean, Alvin Kamara not having the biggest year. I think you do need to fix that situation. Chris Olave had a big day, 98 yards and 2 touchdowns. But again, find yourself a quarterback, find yourself something to build on here, and let's see what the Saints team can be going forward. Caleb Williams, though, 172 yards with an interception, not his best game, but DeAndre Swift carried 124 yards and a touchdown. So big win there for the Bears. They're going to be taking on the Birds in a few weeks. Curious to see where those teams stand at that point. Dolphins and the Browns. And the Dolphins are, I mean, they're sick. And these Dolphins do not know how to swim. Browns win this one 31-6. Tua goes 100 yards with 3 interceptions. Quinn Ewers comes in here, the quarterback from Texas last year. He goes 5 for 8 for 53 yards, already better than Tua could ever do. I don't know if Tua could count to 5 or 8 right now after all the hits that he has been taking. Dylan Gabriel, though, for the Browns, 13 for 18, 116 yards. And Quinshon Judkins, who would have thought he would be the number 1 back coming out of Ohio State last year? He had 25 carries, 84 yards with 3 touchdowns on the ground. And, I mean, I don't want to say it yet, but the Browns might be built for the future here. They're looking like they have their quarterback, their running back, and they have Shadur Sanders on the shelf if needed, but they can get some more pieces in here, maybe bring in a wide receiver next year. I think this team can start getting it going. The defense isn't horrible. You have Myles Garrett on a long contract. Maybe the Browns, maybe they're building for the future. Dylan Gabriel and Judkins, a huge part of that, and I like what I'm seeing from them thus far. Now moving on to this Patriots and Titans game, and there's one key factor that I want to talk about when it comes to this game. But Drake May, 21 for 23, 222 yards and 5 touchdowns. Drake May is up for MVP. I mean, he's playing phenomenal. This Patriots team has turned it around. Mike Vrabel came in here and changed the culture of this team, and I'm loving the way that it's going so far. Ramondre Stevenson, 18 carries, 88 yards, and a touchdown. Stephon Diggs, 7 receptions, 69 yards, nice. And Jason Booty with 2 receptions, 55 yards, and a touchdown. Now, something that stands out to me here is Trevion Henderson. 2 carries for 5 yards. Now, coming out of college, he was a dog. I mean, he got it done in every aspect for Ohio State. You looked at the pass game and the screen pass that he had in the national championship. There was just so many different things that Trevion Henderson could do. He could do it out of the backfield. He can receive. He was a dog in general. Now this season, he has 43 carries, 153 yards, and just 1 touchdown. And it feels like every week he's just getting less and less touches. I'm not sure what the Patriots' mindset is on him. I don't know why Ramondre Stevenson is still number 1 back at the age that he's at. I get he's a bigger back. You can use him at the goal line, but why are you not being more creative with what you have in Trevion Henderson? I feel like there's so many opportunities to get him involved in a game. He's speedy. He can get it done. I have so many questions for the Patriots as to why they're not using him. But with that being said, I think what the Patriots are doing is working, and I love everything about it. I think they are a true contender here for a Super Bowl run if they, get a few things going here. I think they can still use a little bit of help on defense when it comes to that, but I like this team. I like everything that's happening. They are my sleeper team for a Super Bowl run come the beginning of the season, so I love the way that that's playing out for the Patriots there. Then in another game where this team shouldn't touch a football field again, that's the Las Vegas Raiders. They lose 31-0 to the Chiefs. Now, I think when you look at this score in 31-0, it's not necessarily Chiefs defense just phenomenal. I think you have to look at how bad this Raiders offense is. Geno Smith goes 10 for 16 for 67 yards in an NFL game. That's horrible. You actually saw Kenny Pickett come into this game and play a little bit. That's how bad things got. Ashton Genty, he goes 6 carries for 21 yards. You saw his post-game interview. He said that this has been a losing environment for a long time, and we need to change that. They're headed into a bye week. I'm not sure what things are going to be here for the Raiders going forward. You bring in Pete Carroll, you think that he's going to change his locker room, the mentality. He was we need to win. I loved everything he was saying before the season. But now you look at the way things are playing out, and it is just not happening how Vegas could have imagined. Patrick Mahomes, 26 for 35 in this one, 286 yards and 3 touchdowns. Pacheco, 57 yards and a touchdown on the ground. And then Rashee Rice and his comeback he's been making here, 42 yards and 2 touchdowns. So with all that being said, I'm very curious with the sports books and how they're taking on this Chiefs resurgence here as they're now 4-3. The Chiefs are now favored to win the Super Bowl, and Patrick Mahomes is favored to win the MVP, all with the Chiefs being number 3 in the division. What do they know that we don't know? The Broncos are 5-2, Chargers are 4-3 and have the tiebreaker, and then the Chiefs are there at 4-3. Why are you favored to win a Super Bowl at 4-3 and number 3 in your division? A lot of questions to be asked there. I think that just shows that everybody is so high on the Chiefs and they don't think they can lose now that they're on a winning streak. But I still think there's a lot of holes in this Chiefs team, and I get that you come back from your injuries and everything and your suspensions because you're a dirty team, and you can't you're starting to get things done, but I do think that you still have to hold weight to the fact that the standings are the way they are, the teams that they have lost to, and I don't know, just very curious on that. That actually brings me to my next little thing here before we get into the rest of the football slate is, if Jalen Hurts is always reprimanded for having too much talent around him, that's why he gets things done. Him having A.J. Brown is why he can have yards through the air. Him having Saquon is why the team can win a game. Then why is it when Patrick Mahomes is without his top receivers, Josh Allen doesn't have a top receiver, and that's then said that, can you imagine what the Chiefs would be with their starting wide receivers back and all their weapons back? And can you imagine if Josh Allen had a number one wide receiver? If that's the case, then why does it fall on Jalen Hurts that he has such a great wide receiving core, that he has a great running back, and they can win games? But then when a team doesn't have that, can you imagine what they would be with it? I just don't think you can hold it against Hurts that he does have that, but then use it as an excuse as to why Josh Allen hasn't been having the best season or why Mahomes wasn't having the best start to a season. I think it's a very double standard, and I think you have to look at that in the grand picture as to maybe if you just have a great GM and they bring in great players, the team can use that to their advantage, and it doesn't have to necessarily be a knock to one player or another. It can just be the way it is. But I'll leave you on that before I head to our next time out here. You're listening to Locker Room Buzz here on 95.3 WCHE, and we will be right back. And welcome back to Locker Room Buzz. I'm your host, CJ Tully. And the next game on our slate here is going to be the Philadelphia Eagles. They took on the Minnesota Vikings in a big game there with your boy Carson Wentz on the other side of things. Eagles win this one 28-22. And what a game it was. Jalen Hurts really showed up in this one. And as I said, he makes that difference. And he goes 19 for 23 through the air, 326 yards with 3 touchdowns. So proving to everybody who might have said that Jalen Hurts still does not have an arm, that he does, and he knows when to use it. Look at the other side of things, though. Saquon Barkley, 18 carries for just 44 yards. I'll be getting to that in just a bit. But looking at the wide receivers here that got it done for Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith, 9 receptions, 183 yards with a touchdown. A.J. Brown, 4 receptions, 121 yards, and 2 touchdowns for him. So lots of exciting stuff there for the Philadelphia Eagles. But going back to Saquon Barkley here, 18 carries, 44 yards. I don't want to jump right on the whole boat of, now we need to start running the ball because we're starting to throw the ball. I think you need a balanced offense, and I've said that time and time again, that as long as you're winning games, I don't have a problem with how you're winning the game as long as you're winning it. They won here, but I do think it's a little bit concerning, the fact that Saquon Barkley has been off to such a slow start. Now, with the historic season, you would have expected somewhat of a fall-off. You don't expect 2,000 yards every season, but he hasn't really been able to find holes. He's getting the carries necessary to get himself at least 80 yards a game, and you just haven't seen it. It seems like he's just getting stopped at the line every time. Maybe he'll get a burst for 5 or 6 yards here or there, but you just haven't seen even a decent season out of Saquon Barkley. So want to see him get more involved. I think a lot of that does fall on the offensive line and just not creating holes for him. I do hope that with the air game being so lethal right now, that does start to open up some holes for Saquon to find. I'm not too concerned with it. Just want to see us get back to being a little more balanced on the run game. But I have no problem with Jalen Hurts airing it out. Again, 19 for 23, no problem with that whatsoever. On the defensive side of things, Jalen Hunt, 42-yard pick six, love to see that. Carson Wentz got absolutely rocked on that play. Andrew Makuba also got himself an interception in this one, as Carson Wentz just threw up a offensive punt. Speaking of Carson Wentz, 26 for 42, 313 yards with 2 interceptions. Jordan Addison, though, he had a big day, 9 receptions for 128 yards. So big win there for the Eagles. That was a must-win, in my opinion, just to calm everybody's nerves after 2 straight losses. And what felt like forever, because you had that Thursday night game, and it felt like you hadn't played a football game in forever. But good win there for the Eagles. And on top of that, they bring back Brandon Graham, who last year had 20 tackles, 3.5 sacks, and a forced fumble in just 11 games played. I'm a fan of the move, just given the fact that I think he's going to bring a lot to this locker room. Again, I'm not sure how much he's going to bring to the field and what he's going to be able to produce for us there. Not sure how much playing time he's going to get. It's been said that he's been working out. It's still unsure if he's going to play against the Giants this week, as far as I've heard. I would like to see him play at home against the Giants, see what he has before the bye week, see what you have to work on going into it. As against the Giants, again, shouldn't be too challenging, but you saw them beat you on the road just a few weeks ago. So curious to see what happens here with Brandon Graham. I think, again, he's a huge piece of this locker room and what he can bring there with them. Moving on to just some other games this weekend, the Giants, they lose 33-32 in a crazy game to the Broncos. Broncos came back big in that fourth quarter. Bo Nix, 27 for 50, 279 yards, 2 touchdowns. He also rushed for 2 touchdowns as well. Moving forward, though, I want to talk about this Colts-Chargers game before we get out of here. Daniel Jones is looking like the real deal here. Indiana Jones has found the lost ark. And Jonathan Taylor, not Tyrod Taylor, he played over there for the Jets. But Jonathan Taylor gets it done on the ground yet again, another 3-touchdown game for him. And this Colts team looks dangerous. Daniel Jones this season, 1,700 yards, 10 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and 4 rushing touchdowns as well, while Jonathan Taylor, he has 697 yards and 10 touchdowns. This wide receiving core also got involved with Alec Pierce, Michael Pittman Jr., and Tyler Warren, all getting it done there for them. I will say Justin Herbert did throw for 420 yards and 3 touchdowns with 2 interceptions. That was on 55 passing attempts. But I think the Colts are the real deal this year. I think teams might still be looking at them as not the Colts of today. They're kind of just looking at them as the Colts of the past, who might be an easy win. So when they lose to the Colts, they're looking at them and saying, oh, we lost to the Colts. But the Colts could be the top team here within the AFC. So I wouldn't be discrediting myself with that whatsoever. You then had the Cowboys and the Commanders in a big NFC East matchup. And the Cowboys, I hate to say it, but they're looking really good right now. Dak Prescott, 21 for 30, 264 yards with 3 touchdowns. I don't think he's ever really been the issue for the Cowboys. I will say, I used to say him over Carson Wentz when we did have Carson Wentz. I just liked what Dak was able to do with the mobility and what he was able to do through the air. Javonte Williams, 116 yards and a touchdown in this one after a very lackluster game last week. And then you have CeeDee Lamb in his bounce-back game, 110 yards and a touchdown. And George Pickens, 82 yards as well. You keep going here. I mean, Jake Ferguson, 7 receptions, 29 yards, and 2 touchdowns. This offense can get it done. It just sucks. I mean, if they had somebody like a Micah Parsons on defense, they might be able to get a few more stops. But, if only the Cowboys had Micah Parsons, right? But I still think they're only a few moves away on defense from truly being a contender here, especially with the way the Eagles are playing and the schedule they have remaining. The Cowboys can get things going. I would be a little fearful of them within the NFC East. But a few more games to get to here. The Packers, they beat the Cardinals in a big one, 27-23. Falcons and 49ers on Sunday Night Football. Falcons, I thought they were a true contender here. It's starting to look like their offense might not be all that it was cracked up to be. It might just be a Bijan Robinson show. But Michael Penix Jr. gets hurt in this one, but he does go 21 for 38, 241 yards and a touchdown. Unlikely that he'll play this week. But Christian McCaffrey for the 49ers, 24 carries, 129 yards, and 2 touchdowns on the ground with 72 yards receiving as well. Moving on to Monday Night Football, we had the Buccaneers and the Lions. Baker Mayfield, 28 for 50, 228 yards with a touchdown and an interception. Not his best game, but Jahmyr Gibbs gets it done for the Lions. 17 carries, 136 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 82 yards receiving. Mike Evans will be out for a while there for the Buccaneers, so that's something to keep an eye on. Then you look over here at this Texans and Seahawks game. C.J. Stroud, 23 for 49, 229 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. And yikes, I'm a Texans fan, and it's looking like this is just not the year. This might not be the offense. There's a lot of questions to be asked here with the Texans. And the way that C.J. Stroud played in his rookie year, you thought, okay, maybe last year was a sophomore slump, but this offensive line has been horrible. Nobody's been able to block for him. They haven't been able to get a run game established. You have Joe Mixon, you have Nick Chubb. Those are 2 guys that you would think be able to carry that run game. Just haven't been able to do it offensively. Just have not been able to put up enough points here. On the other hand, though, the Seahawks team, they were my pick to win the West, and I was very curious at why they were the least likely to win the West, just given the team they had. I think people were still not giving Sam Darnold the credit he deserved. He goes 17 for 31 in this game, 213 yards with a touchdown and an interception. On the run game, Zach Charbonnet, he was a difference maker with 12 carries, 49 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And Jackson Smith-Njigba continues to get it done at wide receiver. 8 receptions, 123 yards, and a touchdown. He has been absolutely incredible for the Seahawks team. And again, there's a huge reason why I thought this team had the chance to go on and win the West, and it's starting to look like that might be the case. But again, my biggest takeaways here from this weekend have to be, 1, that the Browns might be built for the future. 2, that the Patriots are the real deal. Drake May should be up for MVP. And I think TreVeyon Henderson is a missed piece here within this Patriots offense. Another big point I want to make about this week is the Cowboys and how I think they are legit. They're just a few pieces away on defense. They did have a pick 6 there by Bland. That was his big thing for the past few years. But if they can continue to get something done there on the ground, I think they're on the defensive end. I think the Cowboys could be a true contender. I know Eric here at WCHE is a huge Cowboys fan, so anybody can razz him for that. But I do think they're able to get it done. If they're able to get it done on the defensive end, they could be something here. But let's go over a few of the standings in the NFL before we get out of here. I will have an uploaded podcast episode on Let's Talk Sports about the Flyers, as I was not able to get to that within this show. So check that out on Spotify. But going over the standings here within the NFL, Patriots leading the AFC East 5-2. The Bills under them at 4-2. They're looking for a big bounce back win this week. Dolphins 1-6 and the Jets 0-7. Absolutely abysmal. Moving over to the North, Steelers in the lead here with a 4-2 record. Bengals 3-4. Browns 2-5 and the Ravens at 1-5. Also needing a big win coming back from the bye week. And the AFC South, Colts 6-1. Jaguars 4-3. Texans 2-4. The Titans 1-6. Not sure what more the Titans need to do to get something done here within that division. You look at it, Cam Ward hasn't played horrible. They have receivers. They have, I'm not going to try and say it, Ayamor guy. And then you have your other guy with Calvin Ridley. So you have enough receiving help. You have the running back. I'm not sure what more the Titans need to do. AFC West, the Broncos 5-2, Chargers 4-3, Chiefs 4-3, and the Raiders at 2-5. Moving on here to the NFC, the Eagles at the top here, 5-2 of the East. Cowboys 3-3, Cowboys 3-1, Commanders 3-4, and the Giants 2-5. A lot of hype around that team. The Eagles will play them this week, of course, but I think that when the hype settles down and the team can get back to reality, things will all fizzle out there. In the NFC North, the Packers 4-1-1. What a boring team to watch. I will say, in all honesty, the Packers just are not fun to watch. They're a decent team, but them not having a number one guy. I thought Matthew Golden would be the most electrifying player here for them. Just hasn't really shown to be the case. Lions 5-2, Bears 4-2, and the Vikings 3-3. Moving on here to the NFC South, Buccaneers 5-2, Panthers 4-3, Falcons 3-3. Still looking to see them make the jump that I thought they would be able to this season, and the Saints 1-6. Now moving over to the NFC West, the 49ers 5-2, Seahawks 5-2, Rams 5-2, and the Cardinals 2-5. So it's going to be a dogfight down here at the end of the NFC West, see who can make the playoff push. I think they could be the division where three teams make it into the playoffs, so we'll keep an eye out on all of that. But as always, guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Locker Room Buzz. I'm CJ Tully. You can always check me out as these episodes are podcasted on Spotify at 95.3 WCHE. You can also check me out separately on Instagram and TikTok at LRBuzz_pod. I post daily content there, very daily content. You'll get at least one or two posts a day. So if you like to hear from me, that's the place to find me. And then on Spotify, I also have my own podcast at Let's Talk Sports, talking the latest in sports. Those are about 5-minute episodes, just breaking down different topics. Again, I said how on Friday night I just did a spur of the moment one about Louisville versus Miami. I will be doing my Flyers update probably today or tomorrow, so check that out. And then I always preview the college football slate and give a recap. The preview comes out Thursday. The recap will come out on Tuesday. So stay tuned for all of that. Thank you guys again. Tune in next week for a little of a spooky Halloween episode of Locker Room Buzz. I'm CJ Tully. Check us out next time.